Good morning. It is Monday of Holy Week 2024, and we're going to keep up with the news this week as we are wont to do. The news won't stop. Um, just remember, Cardinal Fernandez promised initially that it would be the end of March, and then later he had revised that to early April, that we would get a document from the Vatican on human dignity, a document that he is writing for Francis. That fills my heart with joy as much as it does yours, I know. I know you eagerly want to know what Cardinal Fernandez has to say on human dignity, one of these weird concepts that have emerged from Vatican II as a focus for the church. This claim that there are now a better understanding in our time of human dignity than ever before in human history. It's an odd claim, one that is completely divorced from reality, but such is the state of the church today. So, good morning to people here. We will have that um, document when it comes, whether if it's this week or next or the week after. We'll have it when it comes, and we'll go over it in painful detail for everybody. So, we're going to give you an update today on the canceled Opus Dei priest. He is facing a canonical trial, essentially, for, well, the high crime and misdemeanor of criticizing Francis, the Great and Merciful. He's facing not only expulsion from Opus Dei for this, but also being laicized for criticizing publicly Francis. And here he has first an update on that, and then we'll go to his most recent letter that he's given to the public. He has called them his letter series Maria Supplicans, which is a play on fiducia supplicans. But here we have, he says, "Dear friends, good news. The regional vicar of Opus Dei in Côte d'Ivoire has given me a new appointment so that I can defend myself as I am accused of having, quote, criticized the sovereign pontiff. Remembering what Pope Francis himself said to Italian bishops, I really hope to win this trial if my judges are honest." And he's got a link to an article here that we will actually go over a little bit more detail than just a screenshot from him. So, from the Catholic Herald, this came out like 5 years ago, or 6 years ago almost. But their headline is, Pope Francis, it is not a sin to criticize the Pope. You hear that, Pope splainers? It is not a sin to criticize the Pope. Coming right from the mouth of Francis the Great and Merciful himself. So, let's take a look at what Francis has to say, because there's always context that's important here. But he says it's not a sin to criticize the sovereign pontiff, which is good news for Father Jesus Marie Mizigbeto, which is a pen name. But his entire defense is resting on the idea that those who are running these procedures against him are going to be honest brokers, and I don't think he's got that going for him. But let's go over what Francis said, because this is important before we pivot over to the latest letter where where Father Jesus Marie Mizigbeto calls Francis Judas, basically. So 6 years ago, Francis said, quote, Pope Francis has told the Italian bishops that it is not a sin to criticize the Pope here. Note the word here. As he opened their General Assembly. The Pope revealed 3 worries during his speech: the decline in vocations, financial scandals, and the reduction and merging of dioceses. This is 2018, folks. He encouraged the bishops to, quote, speak openly, urging them to tell him all the words, your concerns, criticisms. It is not a sin to criticize the Pope here. Yes, not a sin, and inspirations that you carry in your hearts. Pope Francis said he was especially concerned at the hemorrhaging of vocations to the priesthood and religious life in Italy, adding that God only knows how many seminaries and monasteries will have to close. He blamed factors such as demographic changes, scandals in the church, and a, quote, dictatorship of money that dissuades young people from making lifelong commitments. Italy is experiencing a crisis of vocations in a region that was once the world's biggest source of missionaries and was now entering a vocational sterility. These are my concerns, the Pope concluded. They are points for reflection. So it's not a sin to criticize the Pope here. And Father Jesus Marie Mizigbeto is relying on that statement to make it so that for his defense. Pray for the priest. I don't think this is going to go well for him. As Gregory says, if my judges are honest. Right. If they are honest, indeed. Sonny asks, the line of Francis criticizers is getting longer. Reasonable people would stop and think that if they're getting criticism, then maybe they are wrong. You would think, but that's not the kind of thing. We're not dealing with reasonable times or reasonable people. So let's go now to actual his latest statement, which unfortunately he posted a link to with it, but unfortunately his link was an accidental incorrect link to a previous installation. So I'm going to have to just read this in this way. This is the best way we have it. You can see there that I commented on it that it's the wrong link. So, but here we go. Open letter, Maria Supplicans, concerning the truth about Pope Francis and his moral and doctrinal errors, part 5, dated the 24th of March, 2024, Palm Sunday. So again, this priest, who's soon to be laicized, almost certainly, message to the faithful around the world about the errors of Francis. Dear faithful Catholics throughout the world, today the Church enters the special time of Holy Week. At the end of this time, the victory of the risen Christ over death, the victory of light over darkness, the victory of truth over error and lies will break forth. But before that, it is worth considering Holy Week as the week of betrayal, because it shows how Judas, one of the 12 apostles, betrayed and sold Jesus, his master. It is sad to write the following lines because they draw a parallel between the action of Judas Iscariot in relation to Jesus and that of Pope Francis in relation to the truth, Jesus. Unfortunately, the facts are objective and show how Francis is playing the role of Judas by sacrificing the traditional truths that the Church received from Jesus, and now he is also playing the role of Martin Luther and the devil. So, Francis is playing the role of Judas, Martin Luther, and the devil. He says this as he goes into his trial for criticizing the Pope. I'm not meaning to criticize the priest here. I just want you to understand the context here, the great risk he's taking with this, because he knows probably how this is all going to play out for him. 1. Pope Francis is a new Judas. On 29th of August 2008, Our Lady of Angera said, "He who could be Peter will become Judas. He will open doors to enemies and make men and women of faith suffer." She is clearly talking about a pope who will betray the church by installing people who are contrary to its traditional teaching. In addition, this pope will mistreat the faithful of the church who wish to preserve the traditional Christian faith. Can we not see this today with Pope Francis? In the new statutes of the Pontifical Academy for Life, which he published on the 18th of October 2016, he removed the declaration by which members committed themselves to defending it in accordance with the traditional teaching of the church. After dismissing people considered traditionalists from the Pontifical Academy and the Pontifical John Paul II Institute for Studies on Marriage and Family, he appointed people who reject the church's traditional teachings. Vincenzo Paglia, and then he just lists a whole lot of evil things that guy has said. Maurizio Cioldi, another list of things. Philip Bourdain, Amerigo Thiel, again, lots of evil things. Alan Tomaset, lots of evil things. Nigel Bigar, Roberto Del Oro official. He just lots of names, all the new people there and all the evils they have done and everything that they have rejected the church's teaching on. And I'll have links to this letter in my show notes at returntotradition.org so you can read it for yourself. It's a long laundry list of evil. These are the people who are supposed to be protecting the church's teaching on matters the world is obsessed with at this point. This is like one of the most concrete examples of the undermining of the church in its day-to-day mission for the salvation of souls. We'll continue. On the other hand, Francis has also appointed and created various heretical bishops and cardinals. John Claude Hollerich, Robert McElroy, Victor Manuel Fernandez, John Stowe, and has been complacent towards others, Francesco Coco Palmiro, several German bishops, etc., who have committed serious faults. He has thus rejected canons 276 subsection 1, 35 subsection 351 subsection 1, and 378 subsection 1, which insists on the importance of choosing and appointing people who are exemplary in human and supernatural virtues, models of holiness, piety, apostolic zeal, and fidelity to Christian doctrine. In reality, this ecclesial custom is not a pontifical caprice, but rather obeys a clear desire of Jesus Christ, founder of the church, who wanted the holy treasure of graces that he entrusted to his church in the sacraments to be administered by holy stewards, or at least stewards who desire to be holy and strive to acquire holiness. Jesus Christ recalled this desire to St. Catherine of Siena, who wrote it to the apostolic nuncio Gerard Dupuy, a relative of Pope Gregory XI. And here's what she said, quote, "When the time comes to choose pastors and cardinals, pray him as far as possible to stop only at the virtue and good and holy reputation of persons. Virtue is the only thing that makes a man noble and pleasing to God." 2. Pope Francis is a new Martin Luther. First of all, we should note a surprising fact: Pope Francis has great sympathy for Martin Luther. Incredible but true. On 2 occasions, Francis has joyfully received and honored the statue of Luther in the Vatican. And he gives the dates: 13th of October. It's a miracle the Sunday, folks. And 25th of October. So the first one was in 2016, the second in 2021. Why is this surprising? Because Luther was officially recognized as a heretic by the church and passed without rectification. Is it normal for a pope to honor a person who publicly and strongly contradicted the teaching of the church and did not change his attitude until his passing? If we remember the adage that birds of a feather flock together, then we understand the situation better. Indeed, Francis's closeness to Luther is not only in sympathy, but also in fact, since he follows the same path as Luther by contradicting the traditional teaching of the church. The difference between Francis and Luther is that Francis's contradiction is subtle and goes unnoticed by many faithful Christians. In reality, it is hidden behind a preaching of mercy that discreetly sidesteps the need for conversion by using relativism and situation ethics. Like the heretic Martin Luther, Francis is creating several schisms in the church: internal, in the hearts of Christians who internally separate themselves from the traditional teaching of the Catholic Church, and external, through the Christians who leave the Catholic Church when they see the moral and doctrinal errors that Francis has the church's pastors teach. The promotion of error is therefore a powerful cause of schism, because error divides while truth unites. Remember that he's about to go stand before Opus Dei and their tribunal, and he's going to almost certainly lose his priesthood unjustly, because he's speaking no lies here. There's no errors here that I can see. Let me know if you think he's wrong here somewhere. Let me know in the comments or in the live chat, whatever. We'll check that in a minute. But let me know, do you think he's wrong to do this? Let's continue. 2 attitudes of Pope Francis reinforce these schisms: his obstinacy in error and his injustice towards, quote, traditionalists. These 2 attitudes allow Francis's moral and doctrinal errors to spread over a long period of time and break down the resistance of those opposed to his errors. It is therefore dictatorship in all but name. Luther was obstinate in his errors, Francis too. The fact that since 2016 Francis has refused to correct his errors, and the fact that these errors are being taught in seminaries all over the world, is not at all good for the church, because Christians who have been deceived into accepting these errors will assimilate them more deeply and will find it harder to separate themselves from them. These errors will shape their thoughts and actions and will gradually distance them from the perfect fulfillment of God's will, and later from the church. The impact in the short, medium, and long term is therefore necessarily negative. Let us take an example: Amoris Laetitia. On 19th of March, Feast of St. Joseph, 2016, Pope Francis spoke of remarried divorced persons in these terms, quote, "In such situations, many people, knowing and accepting the possibility of living as brothers and sisters, which the Church offers them, point out that if certain expressions of intimacy are lacking, quote, it often happens that faithfulness is endangered and the good of the children suffers." What do we have here if not a pope who excuses the sins of adultery and the others of the flesh on the basis of fidelity and the good of children? This is a situational ethic, since Francis arbitrarily places elements that are true but secondary above the higher good that is the virtue of chastity, the object of the 6th and 9th commandments given by the Lord. Luther disliked tradition, Francis too, hence the Argentine Pope's injustice to the traditionalists. In the liturgical sphere, this injustice is marked by Francis's desire to do away with the traditional Mass in favor of the modern Mass, through his motu proprio Traditionis Custodes. Why is this an injustice? The reason is simple. No apostle received from Jesus the modern Mass exactly as it was celebrated today. In fact, the 12 apostles received from Jesus the main nucleus constituted by the Eucharistic prayer of consecration, which transforms the bread and wine into the body and blood of Jesus, together with the preparation constituted by listening to an explanation of the Word of God. Scattered throughout the Roman Empire, these apostles created a beautiful, magnificent variety of Eastern and Western liturgical traditions. If in the East several liturgical traditions coexist peacefully, this is also possible in the West. It was this magnificent liturgical peace between the pre-Vatican II rite and the post-Vatican II rite that Pope Benedict XVI achieved with his motu proprio Summorum Pontificum. In the moral and doctrinal sphere, Pope Francis's injustice affects those who publicly oppose this innovation of his magisterium. Then he lists names: Raymond Leo Burke, Joseph Strickland, Tullio Rotondo, John Rist, Joseph Seifert, the 3 Scottish hermits, on and on and on and on. Yet at the same time, he concedes impunity to those who publicly contradict the traditional teaching of the Church. Walter Casper, Francesco Coco Palmero, Christopher Schonborn, Peter Turkson, James Martin, etc. For example, in June 2017, according to several reliable sources, the police caught Cardinal Francesco Coco Palmero in flagrante delicto for taking part in a James Martin celebration, we'll say, organized in a Vatican flat. The cardinal remained a friend of Pope Francis and received no sanction. However, on the 20th of November 2023, according to several reliable sources, Pope Francis said, quote, Cardinal Burke is my enemy, so I'm taking away his flattened salary. The enmity stems from the fact that Burke has on many occasions publicly criticized Francis's moral and doctrinal errors. Let's pause there. That is a great comparison. You remember this several years ago. Cardinal Coco Palmero, the same cardinal who, by the way, met with the stonecutters recently, was found to have had a little soiree in a Vatican flat of the James Martin variety. He was not punished publicly for that. He's still cardinal, still works in one of the highest offices in the Vatican. He did that. Whereas Cardinal Burke stands against errors and is stripped of many of the perks of his office, making it hard to do his job. That is precisely what we're seeing here. Let's continue with this. Part 3, Pope Francis is a new devil. Again, this priest is saying this and is about to stand before Opus Dei, charged with having criticized the Pope. And his defense is going to be that Francis said that it's not a sin to judge the Pope. We went over that article first to give you, so I can show you why that's not going to work. But let's continue. There's no doubt that the previous sentence is shocking, but we have to leave emotions aside and analyze Francis's errors scientifically to understand that this sentence is perfectly justified. Before this analysis, let us listen to 2 messages from Our Lady of Angera that will certainly petrify those who do not know them. First, humanity will be surprised by the presentation of a man who appears to be good, and he will seduce many by his deceptions, for his actions come from the evil one. Many will see in him a savior, and he will succeed in gathering around him a great number of people. And 2, pray for the church. Many consecrated persons will be contaminated. They will deny the dogmas and turn away from the truth. A man will arise, apparently full of virtues, but in truth he will be an envoy of the devil. He will deceive many people with his doctrine, but he will find a great barrier in the strength and faithfulness of my devotees and my chosen ones. To better understand why some analysts apply these 2 messages to Pope Francis, it is necessary to have read the other messages presented last week in the 4th part of this open letter, because all these messages form a unity. Is it possible that it was Satan himself, liar and father of lies, who inspired Francis to commit his moral and doctrinal errors that attack the family and marriage? This is not impossible, since we recall the words of Sister Lucia of Fatima to Cardinal Carlo Caffarra. The final battle between the Lord and the kingdom of Satan will be over family and over marriage. If the above is only a hypothesis, what follows is absolutely certain. Francis is currently playing the role of the devil with his errors that attack marriage, family, and the sacraments. Indeed, as St. Catherine of Siena said, the demon strives to remove us from the truth. This is what he did with Adam and Eve in Eden, to lead them away from the fulfillment of God's will. This is also what Pope Francis is doing with Christians since 2016 by promoting his moral and doctrinal errors. It is not diabolical to contradict God by telling Is it not diabolical to contradict God by telling Christians that, quote, the commitment to live in continence is an option, and thereby diminishing the force of the 6th and 9th commandments? Citation given to something Francis said on the 5th of September, 2016, in the aftermath of Amoris Laetitia. Is it not diabolical to contradict God by telling Christians that a woman capable of being fruitful and multiplying, who has engages in marital activities, can then have relevant parts that would make that possible no longer part of her when the condition of the child poses no present or future danger to her health, where a group of the supposed experts certify that all her children will not survive, and thus promoting the Catholic Church's first measure against the great commandment of our Lord. Is it not diabolical to contradict God by telling Christians that, quote, one is not born a saint and becomes one? And this also applies to, quote, Our Lady. Something Francis said on the 21st of December, 2018. And thus rejecting Mary's original holiness. Is it not diabolical to contradict God by telling humanity that, quote, the pluralism and diversity of theologies are a wise divine will, and thus attributing to God's positive will the existence of religions that practice evil or sin, such as, for example, idolatry, the offering up of humans, and sacred acts of the marital state? Is it not diabolical to contradict God by telling humanity that, quote, what we have to do is a coexistence, a law of the state, for James Martin types, and thus opposing St. John Paul II and Benedict XVI, who said that all Christians must show their absolute personal opposition to this type of law, otherwise they are committing a gravely immoral act? Is it not diabolical to contradict God by telling Christians that all publicly Moloch supporting Catholic public figures can receive the Holy Eucharist without the need for them to reject their commitment to the Moloch ritual, and thus opposing Christian tradition and the Code of Canon Law, which clearly prohibits such a practice? Is it not diabolical to contradict God by asking priests to perform blessings for couples in irregular situations and of the double S type? Christian blessing by the invocation of the holy name of God on couples whose basis is various sins of the flesh. And finally, the notorious refusal of rectification on the part of Pope Francis obliges us to remember the following words of saints. St. Augustine of Hippo, and he gives it to you in Latin and then translated it as, it was human to sin, it is diabolical to remain in error out of animosity. And then from St. Bede the Venerable, first in Latin, then in English, it is human to sin, but diabolical to persevere in it. St. Peter Damian, first in Latin and then in English, it is obviously human to sin, but to defend sin is truly diabolical. And then St. Bernard of Clairvaux, it is, however, not human, but diabolical to persevere in evil. St. Catherine of Siena, saying, to sin is a human thing, but to persevere in sin is a demon thing. Now, there is no longer any doubt that the bold assertions made above are effectively true. Pope Francis is currently playing the same role as Judas, Martin Luther, and the devil. Next week, we will see, in the last part of this long Lenten letter, the reasons why Francis is probably a member of ecclesiastical stonecuttery or is influenced by ecclesiastics who are members. Your African brother, Father Hanve Gmnau, his real name, pen name, Father Jesus Maria Mizubeto, and he has an email address and all the rest of it. I will have this linked in my show notes at returntotradition.org. By the way, take a look at the long list of his actual citations there. And he says he's going to have another one this week, and I will cover that for you when that time comes. It was hard to read that, not because of what he said, but because the proper link to the good PDF was not available, so his screenshots were like size 4 font on the screen. But yes, that is what we're talking about here. And this is what this priest is saying this just before he's going to have to answer to his superiors for the things he said. So please pray for this priest and pray that he may gain the support he needs after they do what we already know is going to happen to him. All right, folks. Let's take a look here in the live chat just to make sure what's going on here. Yeah, very lively chat this morning. Gregory, if you email me after this live stream or do it now, I can send you links to some of the Latin Mass locating websites. And so I've helped people with that before. Just make sure I can see what it is. I have like 900 emails in my inbox right now. Make sure I can see in your subject line what it is you're looking for, Latin Mass options in Omaha, and I will send you the links I have to the websites that help with that sort of thing. All right, folks, thanks very much. If there's any final thoughts in the comments, this is your time to get them in. Questions, super chats, whatever, just get them in, and then we will move on. Willis says, it is amazing how similar the destroyed tradition people are, even if ostentatiously different. Like the differences are a smoke screen and the real agenda is to undermine the truth. Right, they come from it from different angles, but it's the end goal, and they work together. Whether their main personal issue is the church should be an NGO, or that we should accept everything James Martin says, or they're really working on the deaconettes issue, whatever it is, they work together because they all work for the same goal, which is essentially burying Catholicism and replacing it. All right, folks. Thanks very much for tuning in today. Please pray for this priest and anybody that we spoke about that might give you some negative thoughts. That this is Lent, and we should make the last few days of Lent of this Holy Week count. So please keep this priest in your prayers. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.